got an introduction to Node.js and how it works and how you can use it to write basic Node.js programs. But what you also already saw is that with Node.js alone, you have to write a lot of code to deal with basic things like extracting the body of an incoming request. Now, typically you don't want to do that. You want to focus on your business logic, the code that makes up your specific application. You don't want to work or you don't want to care about standard tasks like handling incoming requests or routing, so executing different code for different paths, different URLs. You don't want to do that, and therefore we'll now have a look at Express.js. This is a framework you can install as a third-party package into your Node project, and as such, it basically helps you outsource some of that nitty-gritty work, some of these details you don't want to care about. It gives you a rule set in which you work and a lot of utility functions that help you write cleaner code and focus on your core business. So what's inside this module then? We'll have a brief look at what Express.js is. I gave you a short introduction already now, but let's take a closer look. I'll then have a look at one important concept that pretty much defines Express.js, or that Express.js is built around, middleware, and what this is, of course. We'll then have a look at how we can work with requests and responses with the help of Express in a way easier way than we did thus far. And we'll also have a look at routing and see how we can execute different code for different incoming requests and paths or URLs without having to write a bunch of if statements. And last but not least, I will also show you how we can return HTML pages, so files we prepared, to our client instead of writing HTML code in Node.js as we did thus far, which wasn't really that great. So let's dive into all of that in this module. So what is Express and why do we use it? Well, I briefly mentioned it. Writing all that server-side logic is pretty complex. Just remember what we had to do to parse an incoming request. For extracting the body, we manually had to listen to the data event, to the end event, and then create a buffer, which we in the end converted to a string. And this was just one type of data we could get. If we get other kinds of data, like for example, we get a file or differently structured data, then we would have to write new logic. Now, Express.js helps us with that. It actually doesn't have a built-in way of handling or parsing the data, but it makes it easy to install another package that can easily be hooked into our project that will then do the parsing for us. And you will see what I mean in a second. We, in general, don't want to care about all these nitty-gritty details. We want to focus on our code that defines our application. So the thing that really sets our application apart from other applications, our unique selling point, you could say. And we do use a framework for this, for all the heavy lifting. A framework is basically a set of helper functions, but also a suite of tools and rules with which we work. So basically, we have a clearly defined way, or at least some outline on how we should structure our application, our code, and how we should work with that framework to write clean code. And of course, I will teach you all of that for Express.js in this module. So Express.js helps us with that, and this is why we will dive into it here. Now, of course, Express.js is not the only package or framework you can use for Node.js that will help you write better Node.js code and focus on your business logic. Now, for one, you could, of course, stick to vanilla Node.js. We only use that thus far, and of course, that works. And depending on the complexity of your application or the level of challenges you're seeking, you can absolutely stick to vanilla Node.js. You can theoretically write everything on your own just with that. There also are other frameworks you could use. For example, there is Adonis.js. Now, if you ever used Laravel for PHP, this is basically a Laravel-inspired framework for Node.js, but not from the same creators. There also is Kua or Sales.js, and there are many more. You can basically Google for Express.js alternatives, and you will find plenty of blog posts diving into the different alternatives and what their strengths and weaknesses are. But Express.js is by far the most popular and most often used one, which is why I will also teach it here. The great thing about Express is that it's highly flexible. It actually doesn't add too much functionalities out of the box, but it gives you a certain way of building your application or of working with the incoming requests that make it highly extensible, and therefore there are dozens or hundreds and thousands of third-party packages built for Express specifically that you can then easily add to your Node Express application without having to configure a lot. And this is probably the real strength of Express. And of course, it also does add some nice features out of the box. So why don't we just install it and take a closer look ourselves? Now, back in our project, let's add Express.js. And you could also simply create a new project. Make sure to install NodeMon, though. I will keep using that. But I will get rid of the routes.js file, because I will basically create a brand new application, you could say. So therefore, of course, in the app.js file, I have to get rid of that import. And that, of course, means I'm now missing my route handler or my request handler here. But we'll work on this later. So let's now install Express.js by running npm install --save. Now, why not --save dev, but --save? Because this will be a production dependency. We don't just use that as a tool during development. It will be an integral part of the application we ship. And therefore, it definitely also has to be installed on any server or any computer where we run our application once we deploy it. It is a major piece of our application. So let's install it as a production dependency with this command. And the name of the package just is Express. So npm install --save express will install Express.js into our project. Now, once it is installed, you see an entry was added to the dependencies in our package.json file here. And now we can start using it. And to use it, I'll go to my app.js file. And here, I will import Express. You can name that constant however you want, of course, but the package is called Express. Now, you can also, of course, group that together with the core module imports. I like to separate my node-specific modules and the third-party packages, and also my own imports if I have them, with empty lines so that you can clearly see what's what. But this is not required. So now Express is imported. And now let's also get rid of that console log statement here. You can create an Express application and store it in a constant named app, though that name, of course, is also up to you, by running Express as a function. So put in other words, the Express package seems to export a function in the end. And actually, you can see this if you hold Command or Control on Windows and you click on the Express here. You're taken to the source code. And there, you can actually see that in the end, at the bottom of the file, it exports E. And don't worry about that syntax here. This is not a JavaScript file. It's a definition TypeScript file. But still, it exports E, which is this function in. So it exports a function here. And therefore, we execute it as a function. And this will initialize a new object, you could say, where Express.js, the framework, will store and manage a lot of things for us behind the scenes. So a lot of logic is in this app constant here. Now, the app here actually also happens to be a valid request handler. So you can pass app here to create server. And if you do that and you run npm start, you will actually have a running server, which of course will not handle any requests though, because we haven't defined any logic that should happen for incoming requests. App will basically not do anything at this point. Well, almost. It does one thing for you. And that is, it sets up a certain way of handling incoming requests that defines or that is a key characteristic of Express.js. And we'll have a look at that in the next lecture. Express